Probably the final update that I'm gonna do on this individual has finally come. The last time I talked about Kevin Bowie was last month. Not even a whole month ago, if I'm not mistaken, when I talked about him, when I ended up bringing up his sister and the connection that she had, or the connection they had to each other, as it pertains to the act in which he committed back in 2020, where he and two others burned down the home of a Senegalese family, taking out five of them and injuring like two or three others. Now, the last time I talked about him, it was just mentioning how he was guilty pretty much of every charge that he was hit with, and that he could face up to 60 years in prison, which was the max that he was going to get. And I remember telling people, I said, don't get too excited, because up to does not translate to meaning he's going to get the max penalty. Well, sentencing has arrived, and I am proud to say that Kevin Bowie, practically the ringleader of this whole thing, got the max sentencing of 60 years in prison. Now, I know some people would probably prefer if he got the capital punishment on top of that, but I don't know if that was on the table when he was charged. I don't even know if that state in Colorado even honors it. Someone can let me know if they do or if they don't. But he got the max penalty, which is 60 years. Which means if he doesn't have the possibility of parole, which I'm sure the article is going to explain if he does or if he doesn't, he'll be like in his 80s by the time he gets out of prison. But let me go ahead now and get into the article itself. And it's coming from HuffPost. In between shifts at Amazon to earn money, she could send home to her relatives in Senegal, working opposite times as her sister-in-law so they could care for each other's children. Hassan Dial would call to her husband several times a day. Amadou Bey was still in Senegal trying to get a visa so he could also come to the United States. His wife, joined by their infant daughter, would also video call every day. Amadou Bey couldn't wait to meet his child and see his wife again, but he never got that chance. Dial, aged 25, and their little daughter, Hawa, and three other members of their extended family were killed in a house fire in Denver in 2020 that authorities said was set in the middle of the night by a group of teens in a case of mistaken revenge. Kevin Bowie, the last of the three suspects, was sentenced to prison for 60 years during a hearing Tuesday after pleading guilty to reduced charges in a plea deal. Bey sees Bowie, now 20, as a terrorist for taking five members of one family, which also includes his wife's 29-year-old brother, Jibril Dial, who was an engineer, Jibril Dial's 23-year-old wife, Aja Dial, and their 22-month-old daughter, Khadija. Their bodies were found on the first floor of the home near the front door as they apparently tried to escape the flames. Members of another family that also lived in the home managed to escape, which also, by the way, the article doesn't mention, but those family members sustained substantial injuries like broken bones and fractures. When he was killed, Jibril Dial was working on a large rebuilding of Interstate 70 in Denver and dreamed about returning to Senegal to build roads there, according to previous testimony from friends and family. Bey, who was granted an emergency visa after the fire, works as a mover and tries to avoid being alone in the evenings to keep from thinking about what he lost. With his roommate working nights as an Uber driver, he goes to the gym or calls family and friends late at night back home. I just don't want to be thinking about that when I'm alone, said Bey. Prosecutors have portrayed Bowie as the ringleader of the group that started the fire. Now, check that out. I said that. If y'all go back and look at the video that I did before this one about him, I said he sounds like he's the ringleader, mainly because he's usually the one who gets hit with the bigger charges or the longer sentencing possibilities is usually the one who led the charge. And when you looked at how they even looked when they were walking up to the residence, he was in front and he was dead center. And I said he was the one who had his phone allegedly stolen. So I said to myself, I said, this guy definitely is the ringleader. The son of immigrants from Vietnam, he had been helping his older sister Tanya, who I also brought up in the last video, deliver drugs she was dealing around the time of the August 5th, 2020 fire. According to federal court documents, the sisters' enterprise was accidentally discovered when police searched their family's suburban Denver home as a part of the fire investigation, and she is currently serving a nearly 11-year federal prison sentence. Their parents must be so proud. On one hand, they have basically a killer, and on the other hand, they have a drug dealer, and both of them are in prison. After being arrested in connection with the fire, Buie told investigators he had been robbed of his phone, money, and shoes while trying to buy a gun, according to court testimony from the case's lead detective, Neil Baker. Using an app to track his phone, Buie said he had learned it was at the home and believed the people who robbed him lived there, though he did not research the home's residents. Baker said at a hearing on the evidence in the case in 2021. Now, one thing you got to understand when it comes to these tracking devices when it's in the phone is that a lot of the times it's not going to pinpoint exactly the phone is in the location that you think it's at. Usually it's just in telling you it's in or around a particular area. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's there. It's just that it's nearby that area. Like, for example, your phone could be in a dumpster somewhere, but it'll locate it in the parking lot where the dumpster is at. It doesn't necessarily mean your phone's just laying on the parking lot ground. It just means it's around the parking lot, but it's in the dumpster. Buie admitted to setting the fire, only to realize the next day through news coverage that the victims were not the ones who robbed him, according to Baker. Investigators never said where Bowie's phone actually was. In May, after a failed effort to challenge key evidence in the case, Buie pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. 60 other charges Buie had faced, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, arson, and burglary, were dropped by prosecutors who recommended that Buie be sentenced to 60 years in prison. And they knew that if those other charges had stuck, if that plea deal didn't go through, he would have most likely got life in prison. So to answer people's questions why he didn't get life, that's why. If there was a death penalty there on the table and he didn't get it, that's why. If Judge Karen L. Brody rejects the proposed deal, both sides would have to either work out another deal or go to trial. Relatives largely support the deal, not because they view it as true justice, but because they see it as the best way to resolve the criminal case nearly 4 years after the fire. Bay, who is Muslim, said he hopes God will provide justice someday, but after nearly 4 years, the relatives left behind are tired and want the last of the criminal cases resolved. We just want to move forward because we're going to have to live with this for the rest of our lives. Last year, Dylan Siebert, who was 14 at the time of the fire, was sentenced to 3 years in juvenile detention and 7 years in a state prison program for young inmates. In March, Gavin Seymour, age 19, was sentenced to 40 years in prison after pleading guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder. Surveillance video showed 3 suspects wearing full masks and dark hoodies outside the home just before the fire started, but the investigation dragged on for months without any of the other leads. Amid fears that the fire had been a hate crime, some Senegalese immigrants installed security cameras at their homes in case they could also be targeted. Police did not believe the home, tucked in many similar ones on a street in a dense subdivision, was picked at random. They tried a new and controversial strategy, asking Google to reveal which IP addresses had searched for the home's address within 15 days of the fire. 5 of them were in Colorado, and police obtained the names of those people through another search warrant, eventually identifying suspects Buie, Seymour, and Siebert as the suspects. In October, the Colorado Supreme Court upheld the search of Google users' keyword history, an approach critics have called a digital dragnet that threatens to undermine people's privacy and their constitutional protections against unreasonable search and seizures. The court cautioned it was not making a broad proclamation on the constitutionality of such warrants and emphasized it was ruling on the facts of just this one case. Well, there you have it, everybody. This dude will be going to find the cell and 4 walls will be his home for the next 60 years. And if you notice, they practically answered another question. Was the possibility of parole on the table? And based on what I read right here, it looks like it's not. Like, it looks like it's going to be just a straight up and down 60 years. Like, he's not going to be eligible for parole, so he has to do all 60. Of course, they're going to probably try to appeal this, but it's going to be very hard for them to get it for him. To me, it should be, in a perfect world, it should be hard for him to appeal this no matter what they try. After all, he got that huge plea deal that knocked all 60 other charges off, leaving him with those other two, giving him the 60. That's why I said, imagine if he had to get hit with all of those, he would have got life. And if there was the opportunity for this to be capital punishment, that's probably would have been on there too, because multiple people lost their lives behind this, including infants. And 3 other people got badly injured, and they could have lost their lives too. And they have to live with this pain and suffering for the rest of their lives, this mental suffering for the rest of their lives. Like I said, they healed from their scars already, but mentally, as I read in the article, one of them said they scared to be alone. Just think about what happened. I always say that mental is always going to outweigh the physical. You can heal from the physical scars, but those mental scars will stay for as long as they want to stay. And he should definitely have to pay for it. So there you have it. This is probably the last update I'm going to do about this individual. I'm glad that I was able to stay on top of this ever since it happened, because like I said, many people didn't even know about this story until last month. For the most part, I remember when this first happened back in 2020. But either way, I'm glad that they got this thug, yes, I said it, off the street and where he belongs. Same with his sister. She's a thugstress. The thing, that's really where it all started at. That's really where it all started at. Him dealing narcotics with his sister. That's where it began. And they want to keep tabs on us. You know how they keep saying, like, this, and I hate to bring politics in it, but you know how the GOP and those on the quote unquote right, especially in MAGAville, well, let's just say 45, says that black people would embrace him because of his mugshot. There's a lot of black people out there that don't have a mugshot, never been to jail. Yet you have not one but 2 people of the quote unquote model minority class, who by the way are siblings, both have a mugshot and both are in jail. One presumably will be old as dirt by the time he gets out, if he makes it out, and the other one, she got over a decade. Go figure. So I'm just saying, it's amazing how the world works.